Hi, my name is Tami Matheny. I am a mental game coach and author, and I would like for you to catch me on the Jesse T Show.
Tami, welcome to the Jesse T Show.
Thanks for having me, Jesse. Looking forward to spending this time with you.
I know, I can't wait. We've been connecting for some time, and we've tried to add value to each other right up front with making connections and doing different things for each other. So I'm excited to have this conversation. So tell the world a little bit about who you are, what you do, and what brought you to today.
I am Tami Matheny. I am a mental game coach, which means I think I have the best job in America. I get to work with athletes, teams, coaches, parents of athletes on how to make their mental game stronger. We spend so much time on the physical part, so adding that mental piece. So that's my passion. That's what I love, and all about growth mindset and entrepreneurship and writing and athletes. So that's why I'm here. All of that mixed in one.
Entrepreneurship, mindset, athletics. I know you're big into all three of those spaces. Pick one. Where'd you get started with all this?
Well, I guess it started with athletics. Since I was a little kid, I think there was a ball or a bat or something in my hands. So I've always identified myself as an athlete. I went on to play tennis and basketball in college. Now still like to stay active with long distance running, have transitioned to long distance cycling. I'm a sports just a sports freak, I guess. That's what I like to do for fun, play or watch sports. And that's my job. So, yeah.
How old were you when you started playing sports, and who was the motivation? Was there a parental figure or a friend that really got you plugged in?
Now, are we talking about organized sports or playing in the neighborhood with
just playing
all of the neighborhood boys?
Yeah, where you got started.
Again, as young as I can remember, we lived in a neighborhood. I think there were about 10, 11 guys within 2 or 3 years my age. And I had a twin brother, and it was just constant after school, just kickball, football, baseball, whatever it was. And I think that was more important for my development than if I had played young or in organized sports. I didn't start playing organized sports till my 8th grade. But again, I felt like I honed my skills a little better by having to put up with the boys. But the influence was my dad. He started off when I was born, he was a football coach. And if you remember the Titans, the little girl that goes with her dad, the football coach, sits there and watches the film. That was me. I couldn't get enough of it. I wanted to be where dad was. He also coached baseball, loved being in the dugout. At an early age, I wanted to keep the stats. So again, just really, I'm a sports nerd, like I just said earlier.
You caught the fever, so to speak, when it came to sports and competition and teamwork. And I was very much the same way growing up in Boston, where I had a lot of friends that were very much into sports and, even hockey, which I didn't love. I was always the goalie because I didn't like it, but by default, I became a really good goalie. And then we were always playing street hockey or football and baseball and basketball and, running through the neighborhoods up there playing manhunt, which was basically like a big game of tag where you're just chasing people down, trying to catch them. And that's where mine started too. It started with just being a kid and having fun and doing fun things as kids. And then, as you said, things kind of evolved. I did play t-ball pretty early on, and that led into, little league and senior league baseball. And then it led into football for high school and basketball for high school. And so very much a similar journey. Talk about once you started getting more into kind of the organized sports. You said it was around 8th grade?
8th grade basketball. I did not play my 7th grade year, and the coach tracked me down because I had her for PE class, and she's like, "You're, wasting a God-given talent." And I was like, I like playing in the backyard with the guys, and that wasn't my journey to begin with, to go on to keep playing sports. That just kind of evolved. I fell in love with it. I fell in love with being a part of a team and having that aspect. So that led to having a pretty good career in high school, basketball and tennis. And then that led to collegiate at the Division II level.
Tennis. And then augment your basketball game, lateral movement, side to side, hand-eye coordination. Like, what was some of the things you were able to translate from tennis back over to basketball?
Everything you just said, but I think more importantly, the mental and emotional touch that it added. I needed that me time, that one-on-one. It's up to me. But then I also needed that teamwork that and being a part of working together with a group that basketball brought. So I really liked having that variety, and I think they both kept me in check. In addition to they helped keep me in shape for each other.
For sure. They were complementary to each other for sure. I know a
Yeah.
lot of people that played sports that maybe would do track or do a different sport, and they would just try to be a dual sport athlete so they could kind of keep in condition and be busy all year round. Speaking of tennis, I found a sport in the last year called pickleball. Have you heard of this?
I have heard of it. Yes.
Pickleball is fun. Have you played it before?
I haven't. My parents just recently moved to Florida, and it's the big rage there. So they've told me about it. I'm hoping to pick it up when I visit sometime.
I know it seems like, and it kind of sounds like maybe it was inspired by those of elder years that are playing, but man, it is incredible. It's high stakes. It's cutthroat. It's you get a couple late 30s, early 40s guys that get together every Wednesday and play on the courts here locally in Atlanta, and it's unbelievable. It's really fun. So if you get a chance to get out there, I'd recommend it. It's fast paced. If you can, yeah. If you can.
That's what I've heard and seen. Yeah.
So talking about your collegiate, career in terms of athletics and also what you studied, like what was your college experience like?
College experience. I was also a nerd academically. Made my first B, I think, my junior year, and thought the world had ended.
Blacker.
But that was good. Now, when I became a coach, I didn't encourage my athletes to make Bs, but it's okay. I think I needed that because I was such a perfectionist mindset. I would remember the shots in basketball I missed, not the ones I made. And that was really a struggle for me. So I think there was a lot of evolution starting to happen in college that led me on the path I am now, being a mental game coach, because I didn't want athletes having that same journey. I enjoyed my journey, but it was a struggle mentally at times. But had a pretty good career. Still hold a couple of 3-point shooting records at Lenoir-Rhyne College. So,
what are they?
Excuse me?
What are the records?
I don't know the exact number because I'm not into numbers, and I tell people not to get into stats, but for the most 3-pointers in a season and most in a game.
Is this the furniture capital of the world, Hickory?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Not many people know that. High Point, North Carolina.
High Point, yeah. High Point, that's what it was.
But Hickory, High Point, they're both of them pretty heavy on the furniture.
I used to run a business.
That's so random.
I know, it really is. I get a weird memory. So I used to run a business in Charlotte, North Carolina, and it was an outside sales company. And we had these teams of people that would go out door to door, business to business. And we would always go up there like a day trip from Charlotte, because it's like an hour and a half, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And we'd go up there and we'd knock the socks off up there because we were selling Braves tickets, Atlanta Braves tickets, 5 hours away, maybe more, in Hickory or High Point, both places, North Carolina, to go to a Braves game. It was crazy. So anyway, I digress. I was just thinking about that time period of my life. Speaking about
I like it.
Being an entrepreneur, that was kind of part of my role. But and I know this a little bit from sports and people that are college athletes, your schedule, especially if you're really academic too, and you're really trying to get A's and you're really focusing on sports, fair to say your schedule is pretty tight?
Yes. And I think that was another benefit of playing both sports. I tended to be a lot more focused and better with time management when I knew I had to do things. If it was an off day or off season, I could get a little, I don't want to say undisciplined, but I could waste some time. So it really helped with time management.
I feel like most college athletes at the D1, D2 level are like mini CEOs. I mean, things with nutrition and eating well and making sure you bake in time for academics and getting your degree and also being a full-time athlete. And so I feel like those foundations, those core tenets of work ethic, time management, being mindful of just kind of where to be and how to show up. Those are building blocks for being an entrepreneur in so many ways. Where did you
definitely.
start your entrepreneurial path? Was it pre-college? Was it after college? Like when did you start getting into this, world?
I think I was 5 years old with my lemonade and watermelon stand that my
Okay.
twin brother and I would do.
Very
So I think it started then. And then in high school, I was always trying to give tennis lessons here or there to the younger kids. And, my grandfather had a farm. Hey, what could I do to earn money? So, I had a sense for it back then, I guess, without realizing it. And it just kind of evolved. So how I got to where I am now, I spent 14 years at a university coaching and in administration. And while I enjoyed that, I knew there was, I don't know, I didn't like being behind the desk or confined to time. And so it kind of evolved and led me to, hey, I can create my own business, kind of be my own boss, and let's see what can happen. So that's kind of the evolution there.
So the 14 years, what kind of coach? Head coach, assistant coach, and then what school and what were you doing more the day to day?
Started off as a head coach. I skipped the assistant part, which came back to bite me in the butt at times.
Oh wow!
I was kind of learning on my own. But what I realized that no one else wanted the job. So I thought I was special in that I was hired, but I was the only one that applied. I found that later.
Okay.
But took over a very poor program. And basically it was a tennis program at the Division II level, USC Upstate. And they were treating tennis kind of as just to have the sport. A lot of the athletes they had pulled from the soccer team or track team, and it wasn't very serious. But the athletic director said the budget was awful. And he said he wanted it to be nationally ranked within 4 years.
Wow.
I was too naive. Okay, sure. That's a great challenge. Sure, let's do it.
Aggressive.
When like people are telling me, you're an idiot, Tammy. You can't, I didn't know any better. And so I just, started recruiting guys and girls. It was men and women. So started recruiting them and selling them on this belief of come be a part of what people say can't be done. And we just really established together. Everybody says, oh, you had a great culture, but it was together with those players, especially the first ones. And we really did establish an amazing culture there. And within 3 years, we're nationally ranked. Now, first year, I lost every single match, men and women.
Wow.
I don't even think we won a set. So that added some gray hairs, but
for sure.
we chose not to. And I think this is important because I still find myself talking about this every day. We chose not to get caught up in short-term results. This is our vision. If we lose today, that's okay. Also with my recruiting, I didn't want to get a guy that would just help me right now. I wanted someone that was going to help for this vision that I had. So I think that was, a very important piece to the success that we did have.
Another core tenet of being an entrepreneur is sales. And it doesn't necessarily have to be selling a widget or something physical, but you're selling people on the idea. You're selling people on the idea to follow you, have blind faith behind you on the wall, says believe in the idea. And so what was that like in trying to attract people to this kind of off the grid, not very glamorous initially team in school? How was that recruiting people? And where were you finding these people to try to bring them in?
Well, where you're going this week, Peru. My first 5 recruits were from Peru. I had a couple local. Yeah. So it became an international. And the thing about the international players, most of them are mature. I don't want to be stereotypical, but most of them are a lot more mature than the average American if they're willing to come to the U.S.
Sure. Yeah.
They know why they're here. They're very, this is what I want. They don't mess around because they don't want to be sent home.
Huge opportunity.
Yeah. And you don't have to do it with parents. You don't get the phone calls of the parent saying, why isn't my kid playing? I might have gotten them, but I didn't know what they were saying. Right. So, no, I joke. But so then they've just really started recruiting their friends. They knew people. So it really became we had a South American culture. It was predominantly South American. Had a couple of kids from Europe and a couple Americans. But so I think I learned probably more than I helped them with as far as culture, as far as diversity, as far as being open-minded. And it was just an amazing experience. But the interesting thing was recruiting the guys. And I remember one day I was on the court with one of my men during his match, and the other guy, a big ego guy, he looked at me and said, "Women don't belong on this court with us. It's a joke that you're coached by a female." Well, my guy jumped in the net and a fight broke out. Wow. But afterwards, we were calmly talking, and I asked my guys, I looked at them, I said, "Why did y'all want to come play for me?" Because obviously you get it from some of the other guys. And one of the guys looked at me and he said, "Coach, the only person I've ever listened to before is my mom, and you're kind of like an extension of my mom. So I knew I would come and listen to you."
Wow.
Okay.
What a beautiful compliment too, to put up in the ranks of someone's mom, like probably the most important person in someone's life. It's incredible.
Yeah, I made sure they had good relationships with their mom after that. That was the number one thing I looked for.
What were some of the it's a great way to be. I'm sure they loved you for that too. What were some of the roadblocks taking kids from internationally to bringing them to, you said South Carolina?
Yeah.
not the most agreeable place a lot of times for difference, any kind of difference, right?
Yes.
How is it for the kids, even just culture shock of South Carolina?
It was a big culture shock for the first few. I think after that, they would let their friends or buddies know what they were getting into. But the first few, when you're from another country, you have this image of America like Atlanta or New York.
Yeah.
Well, Spartanburg, South Carolina is not close to that. There's not, the nightlife or the glamour or the
big building.
So that was we have one building, I think, over 3 stories. And then not having the transportation system that you think of. That was probably one of the biggest obstacles.
Logistics.
And as a coach, I couldn't give rides. Yeah. And that was an illegal benefit. Wow. So that definitely became a challenge of figuring out, how do I help them get to the grocery store legally? How do I help them go to the movies, to have fun, to experience, something different than the college life? So that definitely was a barrier. Our scholarship budget was very weak as well. And most of them were okay with, I'll come and work too. But again, that finding the jobs that they could legally do, very limited, but they were willing to do about anything.
That whatever it takes mentality, especially, immigrants. I mean, I'm a product of, and most of us probably are at some level, right? But I'm a product of an immigrant family of Italians, and the work ethic and sometimes almost doggedly to a fault, but that is there, right? And it's like, whatever it takes, I'll go shovel snow or up in Boston, whatever I got to do. It sounds like they had that same kind of hustle and that dream to come to America and say, I can make a life. This is a huge opportunity. Get an education, play a sport I love, make a name for myself, kind of thing. How were they just logistically? I'm interested to find out, how were you getting them from point A to point B?
They started developing a great network of friends on campus. I think another positive thing was our men's soccer team was predominantly international as well. Okay. And so they had there was a lot of ties and connections that started being built. They already had the path figured out. So once those relationships, took fruit, and I was constantly asking this men's soccer coach for advice and what to do, and that helped. Now, we've kind of cracked on the lack of diversity in Spartanburg, but one thing Spartanburg does have is that there's a little corridor on I-85 that is like international land, where you have the BMW companies, tons of international companies. So they started recognizing there was a strong international culture. And there are pockets if you find it. And so they started getting involved with host families. And we had a great director on campus that would help connect them to families that were hopefully from their country, if not, that understood their challenges. So it became a community experience.
The community, the networking, the whatever it takes mentality. Again, more pieces that are being added to your students, but also to yourself as well. And you mentioned something earlier that I wanted to bring back up with students and or kids are by far and away our best teachers. Even if we're the teacher, if we're the consultant, if we're the advisor, even as a dad, I have a 6 and a 4-year-old, and they're teaching me so much about life. patience, and just how to use the soft arts of communication versus being pissed off and coming down on them, kind of thing. And there's just these beautiful, and this even happens with my client family too. I'm a wealth manager and advisor, and there's times when my clients are teaching me so much, and they're coming to me for advice, and I can give them what they need, but there's so much I learn in just the nuance of the relationship. And it sounds like you had that same experience.
Definitely. Like we've already touched on, the hard work. And I think without realizing it, I'd always considered myself a hard worker. But then I thought I was kind of spoiled. There was no way I was working while I was playing basketball in college. Right. I mean, that would have been like, no, I'm not doing that. And so I thought, wait a minute, maybe I have another gear. And I really think they brought another gear, out of me. Then just learning about the cultures. I was from small town in North Carolina, Forest City, North Carolina, very small town. So Spartanburg was like the big city to go to.
Right.
We can laugh about that, but if we wanted a nice restaurant or nice meal, you drove to Spartanburg, about 45 minutes away. So they really opened my eyes to how much more there is in this world, and just hearing their experiences. I think they really helped me appreciate relationships. I've always had good relationships, but I don't think I understood the value until through them, and just their family structures and how they're so connected with their family. And again, I know we're being stereotypical. That's not every single person, but the ones that they taught me that. My players taught me the importance of just having relationships. And at the end of the day, that's what's more important. And they actually helped me come up with this. Together, we came up with this saying that our ships are greater than sea ships, that relationships are greater than championships.
Wow.
That was our slang, that we won't have a championship without having relationships. And at the end of the day, it's the relationships that mean the most. So they helped me create that little saying, slogan that is still, I'm using today, and was actually in my last book. So they still have a great influence on what I'm doing and how I'm doing it.
Incredible. That's incredible. And so after about 3 years of bad news bears, so to speak, and just trying to get it all put together, you were able to finally get nationally ranked. What did that look like, and how far was the program able to go before you left?
We went to nationals. The men went, a handful of times, women several times. In nationals at the D2 level, it's not necessarily 1 through 8 play each other. It's regionally based. You play out of your region, even if you're the best teams.
Okay.
So 2 years I remember we were beaten by the national champs, who were actually in our conference. So we considered that we were runner-ups technically. That's what we thought. But we reached, I think, number 4 in the nation at one point.
Wow.
And we were the 3rd best team in our conference, and we were 4th in the nation.
So to get context, to go not ranked at all, and then to be ranked number 4 in the nation out of how many rankings was it total?
They did 25 at that time.
Okay. Unbelievable.
Yeah, top 25.
To go from not ranked to number 4.
And again, we didn't know any better. That was what was expected. That's what I sold the athletes come and do. And, we didn't see any obstacles. A great story, during that time, we also transitioned to Division I, with the higher level. And everybody didn't expect anything from us. Of course, that helped feed our motivation a little more.
Yep.
And our women, the first year in that conference, were picked to finish last. And I remember a young lady, I was going to say from Peru, but she wasn't. She was from Colombia. She tells me, "Coach, we're going to win the conference." And I said, "I know we are, Anna." She's like, "You do?" And I said, "Yeah, I dreamed that last night." And I really had that image. And so every day at practice, we don't care. She would leave the message. We don't care about rankings. We get better today, so we win conference. And just slowly, the schedule worked perfect. We had the worst teams, and we transcended into playing the top team for the championship. And we ended up beating them 4-3. And, it was one of those storybook journeys, but it was because of their belief, and because they were willing to, if you weren't working hard, they'd call you out. does that help us win the conference? And there was that great, again, people say, Tami, you did a great job with the culture. No, they lived it and breathed it every day.
Facilitated it, and they lived it, they breathed it, they created it. You just facilitated the direction.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, we didn't know any better. And that's when I kind of started, like, I was a mental game coach then, but informally. I didn't have an organized plan or really knew what I was doing. But our goal was mentally and physically, we were going to be the toughest teams in the conference or nation. And they bought into that and lived it and breathed it. And if anything, we probably overtrained.
If nothing else, just the work ethic and the environment that was built and the accountability between players. And iron sharpens iron mentality. Hey, we're not doing our part over here. Let's step it up. And just that kind of that 1% better every day that you said you had this perfect trajectory from like the lower ranked teams to the top, and you were able to have that perfect storm. And so it sounds like some of those players that you recruited, hopefully, the 3 years prior, they got to see the fruits of their labor.
Yes, they did. And, we tried to do a good job of really recognizing the ones that came before too. Because they set the groundwork. If they hadn't believed to come, even though we weren't nationally ranked, but they believed to come to set, kind of a staircase. And so we always try to do a good job of, it was collectively everyone that's been through this program.
Beautiful. Yeah. One team, one fight. Very military background. So as far as the 14 years and how did you, so this is a good question, and it kind of plays back on the military comment where, and it plays into athletics completely. So there's this group that I was connected to a couple of years ago called MVP, Merging Vets and Players. And MVP had a local chapter here in Atlanta, Georgia, run by an amazing human being named John Sterling. He no longer is in that group. He's moved on to do other things. But basically, he used to work with ex-professional athletes and retired veteran military and put them in the same room together, literally, because they had so many similar experiences. And the biggest one, and this as an athlete, the biggest one is when you take off the jersey or you take off the uniform, a lot of people, if they're not planned ahead, they go through an existential crisis. Who am I? What do I do next? Like they lose their place in life unless you plan ahead. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't plan ahead, whether it's an injury, whether it's a life event, whatever it is. And so there's so much common thread between athletes and military. And I'm still an athlete, but never like a professional level, but athlete and military. And I've seen both to where you do kind of lose a little bit about who you are if you're not planning ahead. And so, did you have that at any capacity before you were trying to transition from being a coach and always an athlete? Like, what was that transition like? And did you already know what the next step was going to be?
It was horrible. I really struggled for about 2 years when my playing career was over because I had just always identified myself as an athlete. And then I was no longer an athlete. Got out of shape mentally and physically. So again, though, I think that failure, if you want to call it that, or that rough time in my life really helped me. And I know you're shaking your head no to failure, but I'm okay with failure. I think we need to fail to learn from it.
It's only failure in my mind if you quit.
Okay. All right.
It's a learning lesson.
Learning lesson. Okay. We'll go with that. So I really think that helped me with my athletes to help prepare them. And so it enabled me to take a hard time in my life to help others learn from it.
Yeah.
But it also helped me transition out of a coaching job. And although I'm a mental game coach, you still don't really get that adrenaline like when you're on the sideline coaching. Right. So I knew there was going to be that a little bit. So I think it helped me prepare that way as well. But I played at a small D2 school, so I can only imagine professional athletes and military who have devoted their entire life to it. And it is real. And I think it is something that we all need to be more intentional about understanding and working to overcome, having that plan, having that game plan.
What was the decision and how was the process for you to decide after 14 years of being a coach and building something special? What was the inception to leave and to move into the next chapter?
I kind of was forced to, and I think this is a great story. I had started diving into some administration work there as well, but realized I didn't really like being behind the desk. We had made the transition to Division I. I think this was about our third, fourth year. And the budgets became really bad. We were in over our head financially of all of the money it takes to change. So we were looking for budget cuts. So my AD brings me in. We'd just come back from a spring break trip, and our men were nationally ranked in Division I at that time.
Wow.
Women were doing well. And he said, my assistant coach was a player that had played for me, bought in, was like a son to me. The idea was to eventually leave it to him. So he says, look, due to budget cuts and some other factors, I need you to fire Alessandro.
Oh.
Or you can resign.
Oh.
And I was like, I'm not firing Alessandro. I mean, we have the best program here. I mean, when I say best, academically, we're always the top 2 teams. We had great community service. We, a good image in the community.
Holistically.
And yeah. And I was like, I'm not firing him. And I think this is crappy that you're doing this in the middle of the year. And I said, so I'm done. And, there was some talk of, and I was like, no. And I had a pity party for a few days, like, how dare him? I've done everything I'm supposed to, da, 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 da. And then I thought, you know what? I'm turning my attention to the kids, giving them everything I had. And if I was honest with myself, I was ready to make a move. And I don't think I would have without being forced.
Yep.
So in hindsight, it was one of the best things that happened to me. So I'm very appreciative of that. But it was a tough pill to swallow when you don't get to write the final chapter how you want to.
It's the ego. The ego wants to
yes.
stay. The ego wants to stay. And there's nothing wrong with ego if you manage it the right way and it doesn't lead you into poor decisions. But the ego wants to survive. It's the I. It's the rational. It's the I want my way. And honestly, much like you, I've had an experience in my life a few years ago where something didn't happen the way that I wanted it to. And it literally freed me and gave me the best life I could ever have.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, people will ask me what's one of the best moments that ever happened to you. And I often will share that story, as I'm sure you do.
So here's the question. So Alessandro, did you say his name is? Did he end up staying on for a while, or did you leaving cause him to turn away from the program kind of thing?
No, he stayed. I never shared that with him actually until this past year.
Okay.
I wanted him to continue on with the program and keep it going and, continue leaving that legacy. So he stayed and had some success. He's back in Peru now and doing well. He's an Ironman and accomplishing all kind of challenges. So, but it came up last year. We were talking through the computer and he's like, oh, I would have quit if I'd known that.
Of course.
Well,
if you're like a mom to him, he's going to take care of Mama Bear and spec up for her. And if that might've been the same guy, I don't know, that jumped over the net and fought the other guy, but but it sounds like you had this pull on people. And so if you did tell them you were leaving, they would have followed you too, because people will follow great leaders into hell and back. And I know this from personal experience as someone who's a student and as someone who's been a leader. And the key litmus test is if people won't follow you across the street, well, you got some work to do, and so it sounds like people would have followed you and have followed you to the ends of the earth. So as far as making the transition at this point to go into, did you go right from coaching / administration to what you're doing now, or was there a segue?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I did. The last 2 years of coaching, I was actually, I had become certified as a mental game coach and was using it to better my team. But also, again, I knew, if I was honest with myself, that I wanted to get out of coaching eventually. And so it was part of my exit strategy of having something in place when that time came.
Yep.
So I was prepared in that sense after I got over myself. And at first, I think the first year, I really focused too much on, oh no, I don't have that steady income coming in. But once I was like, all right, I got to trust myself. If I do what I know I'm supposed to do, the jobs will come, the money will come. And that was probably the second most freeing thing that happened to me, and believing that and trusting that. And it's slowly evolved and improved and gotten better every year.
How long have you been in that business now?
10 years.
So the overnight success that takes 10, 15, 20 years. Somebody asked that question, like, how long has it taken? Most people outside of maybe the 1% of rocket ship companies or entrepreneurs, it really takes 10, 15, 20 years to build something of significance.
Yeah. It's an ongoing journey and evolution. And, I think it's also how we define success.
100%.
Some people do with the money that they make, but, my success is how many lives did I make a difference in? And if I do that, then I'm going to be able to pay the bills. And that's what's important to me.
Well, the journey is the prize that I've learned. It's not necessarily the end goal. It's the walk in life,
Right.
the journey, the relationships, the moments, and then it's the people that you impact. And yeah, one of the scoreboards is money for some people, but really it's, did you live a life well lived? Did you live a life that you can look back on and say, I'm happy with what I've done? And basically the biggest thing is dying without no regret. If you can die with no regret, pretty happy life. So talk about the transition a little bit and getting in the kind of the thick of it with just the first year or two, couple of years. How was it in terms of gaining your sea legs, as we would say in the Navy, like just getting your entrepreneurial legs? Because you had all these foundations that were built and all these core tenets of a great entrepreneur in the making. How was the first, just onset of the first year or two for you diving into your own business?
Gosh, there were a lot of emotions. I loved every minute of what I was doing. If I could overcome that fear of where's the next job. So that definitely was the first obstacle. But you're right. So much that my team and I have put in place, I was able to transition. And I think the thing that helped me start to build the business the quickest was the relationship piece. And, my job, most entrepreneurs, you sell yourself. And that doesn't happen unless you're communicating, connecting with people, and really building those relationships. And I remember, I don't know who it was, but a guy told me one time, well, why are you wasting your time speaking to that group? They're never going to hire you. And I thought, that's not the point. That the point is to connect and get them to appreciate what I'm doing. And if they like it enough, eventually that'll lead to a client or it will lead to an opportunity. But it's not seeing every person you see that's a client right there, or it's not. So I'm not going to waste my time. So again, that relationship piece, I really think played a key role. And I'm going to go back a lesson I learned really quick. But when I was recruiting, there was a guy that came to visit, top player in the South American country, really, really wanted him, but it wasn't a good fit. And so I helped him find another school. And I was like, you probably will do better at this school. And his dad always remembered that. And 5 years later, sent a player to me that was better than his son and became the best player to ever play in our program.
Wow.
But I thought back and like, I didn't even realize what I was doing at that moment. But I took that also, like, if you can help people what's best for them without worrying about you, you might not get that short-term result, but it's going to come back long-term. And so that's one of the most important pieces that, and it's a struggle for me. It's not like, I wake up every day and live that. But when I remember that, then I have success.
Yep. It's that deposit that you've made and just the quality and value of other people's lives, that karma comes back around, fate, whatever it is that you believe in, it comes back to you. And a lot of times even more powerfully. So it's just showing up as a good person and doing a good job. And relationships are the most important currency that we'll ever have on this planet. It's the relationship that you have with someone else. And you could be the smartest gal or guy in the room. You could be the best gal or guy in the room. But if you don't have a hand to shake and someone on the other end to shake that hand, then it really doesn't matter. You got to be able to, right? And so the other piece that I can see kind of all around behind you right now is books. And I know that you're an author multiple times. How did you start getting into authorship, if that's even a word? How did you start authoring books? And what was the inception or the muse to start writing your first book?
Well, quick story here. Again, there seems to be always a story, but that's the way life evolves, isn't it? I told you I was a nerd, made great grades, but really struggled writing. Like I would turn in a report. My teachers would always say, great content, great material, your writing is lacking. And I remember my senior year in high school, had a book report. I'm going to nail this. And I was so focused to do really good. It was the best piece of work I did. Got it turned back to me with a big F written in red. And it said, too good to be yours.
Whoa.
And so, so I dedicated my first book to her. No, I'm joking.
Should have had to write the foreword.
Yeah. But again, I held on to that and became a self-fulfilling prophecy. I can't write. And so as I became in this middle game coach, I would go, do my speeches, talks, coaches would say, we need something written. Give us a workbook, give us a book, give us something. No, I don't write. It's just, So I had a coach call me out. You tell us to step out of our comfort zone, but you're not. So I don't think I want to hire you as my mental game coach. Whoa. So that was a eye-opening experience. And I thought, touche, okay, let's get to work. And it was a process. It was a struggle. And I started the first book, it's The Confident Athlete, on confidence. And it started on another subject. And then I thought, you know what, just write about my go-to speech. Someone had asked me, just come in, pull something out, talk right then. It was on confidence, 4 steps. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna just write it, and I'm gonna write how I would talk to a team. Yeah. So it's an easy, simple written book. But the first reason was just to get that chain cut off of my ankle to show I could do it. So I was working on my confidence by doing it. And then the second piece, the reason I wrote it, was to help those young athletes get off of that confidence roller coaster sooner than I did. We're up here when we're winning, doing well. When we have a bad game, bad shot, we go down. And, it was emotionally challenging and wore me out. So that was the second purpose in writing it. And then I kind of caught the bug and just kind of have evolved and have a couple that I'm working on right now as well.
How many books have you published or have been published so far?
3.
And so in terms of the process, because I know a lot of people that listen are either authors, want to become authors, like learning from authors. What was the first process? Self-published, or did you go to a company to help you publish? And what would you have done differently from your first go around?
The first one, I had help. I hired a company to help me. It was kind of a hybrid model, I guess. They taught me everything, but they did a lot of the work for me. So after that, I went self-publishing. I like being able to retain the rights to the books and being able to use them how I want. Yes. I'm not looking to make a career out of being an author. I think it's someone told me it's the best business card you could have.
100%.
And it's like, oh, an author, Tami Matheny. And I felt kind of like a fake at first when I'd hear that, but there's power in that. People are more likely to listen to what you have to say. It gives you more validity. So once I got over that uncomfortableness, I've kind of embraced it. If that gets people's ears to be open to what I have to say, then great. It's worth it. But it's a good learning experience for me when I'm writing. So I kind of got off track from your question, but I think you have to figure out why you're doing it. Your why is very important. If you're doing it to make a living, maybe you need to go another way. If you're looking to kind of offset it or have, looking to make a difference in a certain population, then, there's another route you may go. So I think you have to figure out why you're doing it.
Yeah, the why is so important for so many aspects of life, and it could be personal, business, it could be relationship. The why of what you're doing matters so much, and so I would say the only second or tie for best business card would be a podcast. I've seen my podcast has helped me in so many ways. It's been added so much color to my life and so many great relationships. It's been a masterclass on life and business. And one of those relationships that have come from it that'll make sense in this conversation is Mark Victor Hansen. Are you familiar with that name?
Yes, I am.
Yep. So he's a author of over 300 books, but one of his most popular books people would know is Chicken Soup for the Soul. Mm-hmm. And I've built a great relationship with him, and he and his wife Crystal, they've been on the podcast, and they understand the book writing idea and all these different things. And he was like, I saw him at an event actually about a month ago in Scottsdale, Arizona. I didn't even know he was going to be there. We bumped into each other. He was there as a like kind of like a hush hush kind of. It was a speakeasy, so we didn't know who the speakers were going to be. And it was this beautiful event. He walks in the door. We lock eyes. We ran up to each other, hugged each other. No masks, whatever. COVID doesn't exist at that point. and he starts talking about writing books and being an author to all these people in the audience. There's about 25 of us. And he said the word author. Like what is the biggest part of the word authority? And it's author. You become an authority on something. And it really does open so many doors. When you're a published author, if you make some book sales and some revenue, great, but really the impact of your message that can get out to people, like your ethos is all about leaving people better than you found them. That's kind of how I operate too. And adding value to people and showing people, giving them some love, and down the road, you might get some love in return, but that's not necessarily the goal. Right. And so I think that the book is a great way to do that. Have you seen what are some of the doors that you've seen open up by having, being an author?
Oh, I get calls from coaches all over the nation. It used to be regional, and then they've somehow got a hold of the book and, hey, can you do a Zoom with my team? Or, hey, I want to buy, a copy for each of my players to do a book study with. So it's definitely helped like branch across the US and open me to new people that I wouldn't be in touch with. And like you said, the same with podcasts and, being willing to be on more podcasts and sharing your message that way as well.
Any advice for budding authors that might be working on their first book in terms of getting it to the finished hard copy or whatever version it is, audiobook, but getting it finished? And then also any lessons that you can leave some wisdom nuggets of what to maybe stay away from or to actually do in the process?
I think the biggest lesson I learned is just write. And if you're stuck on a section, then write something else. And slowly it will come together. But I think my first book, I would get stuck and I didn't know how I wanted to finish that chapter. And then just for days, it would sit there. And the last book was just write what I'm thinking. And then I can eventually put it together, or it might bring it together, or that thought I couldn't get to come. So just write. I needed to schedule a time and be away from my common distractions like computer or my dogs, or, I just needed my alone time where there wasn't going to be any interruptions. Because once I get going on a thought, then I can pretty much go, but it's getting past that barrier. Definitely hire an editor if you go on your own. Yes, this last book, this is good. I decided it was during COVID and that I should learn new skills. And I did all of the formatting and editing myself, and I was ready to jump off the roof. It's worth paying. I learned new skills, but it wasn't worth the time and the negative energy.
Right?
Yes, stay in your lane.
As an entrepreneur, that you'll learn pretty quickly that, yes, it's important to learn new things in life, but and it's important to learn new skills and challenge yourself and get out of your comfort zone for sure. But when it comes to business and it comes to speed and efficiency and revenue, you don't have time to go learn something you're terrible at. Focus on what you're great at and hire someone else to do the thing you're terrible at. That's already going to be leagues about like way above that you'll ever be.
Yes. And it was a great lesson. And I had held on to this negative energy with my dad for so long, and it woke me up there. Growing up, after he got out of coaching, he was in real estate, very successful real estate, worked really hard, and he would pay people to cut the grass like before I was old enough to have to do it.
Yes.
Or paid people to do stuff around the house. And I was like, Dad, that's being lazy. I didn't understand. And I struggled with my dad that he didn't take care of stuff. And I think I realized in hindsight, he was taking care of stuff, and he paid people to do things he couldn't do so he could spend more time with my brother and I, and he never missed an event. If he had been taking care of that stuff, he would have missed our events. So it took me all of these years and me trying to do that book to completion to have that aha moment for my dad. So I've apologized since then.
Well, he showed up as a dad and as a provider, it sounds like. And, I had the same exact experience a couple of years ago when I was doing all the lawn work, 4 hours at a clip, and I was doing all the pool work at and these are all great problems to have, a house and a pool and all these different things. But spending hours a week and especially in the summer where you're cutting grass once a week and you're cleaning the pool once a week. I mean, these things take time. And I have a 6 and a 4-year-old and a family and all these different things. And I'm like, it's just not worth it. And so as a financial planner, where I'm all about keeping more of your money, making more of your money, or stop trading time for money, I had to make that mental leap of paying someone else to do the grass or to do the pool. And so I went to the same exact thing, but it's allowed me to, way more importantly, spend time with those that I love. And then instead of paying, spending time doing the $10, $12, $15 an hour work, I could be working on the few $100 an hour work with what I do. So it definitely, it's a mental shift, but it's one that needs to be made.
Definitely. Yeah. And it took me this long to learn it, but I'm glad I learned that. So I'm now hiring someone to do my website instead of me trying to maintain it, because that's the part of my job I hate the most.
Well, give it to somebody else, let them do it. But this conversation has been very insightful, very impactful. I'm sure there'll be another one down the road, because there's lots of questions that I still have personally. But let me be the first one from the audience to say thank you for who you are. Thank you for all that you're doing in the world. And we look forward to the next conversation. She's the amazing, the mighty, powerful Tami Matheny. I'm Jesse T. Be sure to catch us on next week's episode of The Jesse T Show.